This is Chapter 5, Day 6, Applications of the Simplex Method. So all the practice that we've done so far with the Simplex method and using our calculators was so that we could get to an actual real-life problem like this one. So we want to solve the following linear programming problem using the Simplex method, and then we're going to answer the questions. So a furniture manufacturer makes two types of furniture, chairs and sofas. The production process is divided into three distinct operations: carpentry, finishing, and upholstery. The amount of labor required for each operation varies. Manufacture of a chair requires 6 hours of carpentry, 1 hour of finishing, and 2 hours of upholstery. Manufacture of a sofa requires 3 hours of carpentry, 1 hour of finishing, and 6 hours of upholstery. Owing to limited availability of skilled labor as well as of tools and equipment, the factory has available each day 96 man-hours for carpentry, 18 man-hours for finishing, and 72 man-hours for upholstery. The profit per chair is $80, and the profit per sofa is $70. So what we need to figure out is how many chairs and sofas should be produced each day in order to maximize the profit, what actually is the maximum profit, and we want to give an economic interpretation of our slack variables. So I am going to actually skip over the first section of organizing my data, and I'm going to come back to that. I'm going to start with defining my variables. So the two things that we are making are chairs and sofas. So I'm going to say x sub 1 is chairs, and x sub 2 is sofas. What are we actually trying to solve for? Z is the max profit. And then we're going to need some slack variables. I'm going to come back to those. So I'm going to organize my data. How are we making chairs and sofas? We had three things we have to do. We have carpentry, finishing, and upholstery. And x sub 1, x sub 2, and my total column. All right, so for a chair, it's 6 hours of carpentry, and then I'm going to go down my column vertically because x sub 1 is my chairs. So 6 for carpentry, 1 for finishing, and 2 for upholstery. Then for sofas, down this column, x sub 2, it's 3 hours for carpentry, 1 for finishing, and 6 for upholstery. We only have 96 man-hours for carpentry, so no more than that. So less than or equal to 96. We only have 18 hours for finishing, so no more, less than or equal to 18. And we have 72 hours for upholstery, so less than or equal to 72. So when I go to fill in my slack variables are always from these, this column here, whatever I'm using to make up my items. So I'm going to need an S sub 1, which will be extra hours of carpentry. So if I have anything left over, that's my slack variables. S sub 2 could be extra hours of finishing. And S sub 3 will be extra hours of upholstery. Okay. So now using the data that I took above, the constraints, I'm going to go actually write the inequalities that come from these. So 6x sub 1 plus 3x sub 2 is less than or equal to 96. 1x sub 1 plus 1x sub 2 is less than or equal to 18. 2x sub 1 plus 6x sub 2 is less than or equal to 72. And so now I'm going to take those constraints and actually change them into equations by adding in the slack variables. Oh, and I'm forgetting my non-negativities. X sub 1 comma x sub 2 need to be greater than or equal to 0. I can't have negative chairs and sofas. All right, so now I'm going to carry this guy over. It's going to be 6x sub 1 plus 3x sub 2 plus slack variable 1 is equal to 96. X sub 1 plus x sub 2 plus slack variable 2 is equal to 18. 2x sub 1 plus 6x sub 2 plus slack variable 3 is going to equal 72. So those guys are all lined up. Now my objective equation, I'm trying to solve for Z, my max profit, and it said it was 80 per x sub 1 and 70 for x sub 2. So if I bring this up here and set it into my equation for my system, I've got to bring everything over to the left. So it would actually say negative 80 x sub 1, negative 80, yep, negative 80 x sub 1, minus 70 x sub 2, plus z equals 0. All right, and that's all we need so far for our setup. Our variables are once we've actually solved, and the solution will be our economic interpretation in words. So now I'm going to take this whole part right here and go put that into my tableau on the next page. So I'm going to set up my initial tableau. I'm going to label x sub 1, x sub 2, x sub 1, s sub 2, s sub 3, and z. And I need 4 rows. 6, 3, 1, 0, 0, 0, 96, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 18, 2, 6, 0, 0, 1, 0, 72, and then my maximization equation, negative 80, negative 70, 0, 0, 0, 1, and 0. All right, so I'm now ready to go put this into the graphing calculator. So I'm going to switch to that. There it is. And now I want to second plus sign. The last time I used my calculator, I had some other stuff in here, so I want a number 7, clear it all out, reset all my RAM, number 2, enter. All right, so now I can go second matrix, and it's all cleared out. I have no matrices listed in here. So now I'm going to arrow to edit, and I'm going to edit A. I have a 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 4 by 7 matrix that we are going to enter in. Whoa, not 47. 4. Delete. Enter. 7. That looks better. All right, so now I'm going to type in my numbers, enter in between. 6, 3, 1, 0, 0, 0, 96, 1, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, and 18. 2, 6, 0, 0, 1, 0, 72, and then negative 80, negative 70, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0. All right, and that guy's good to go. He's stored. So second click. So now I'm going to go back and determine what my pivot element is going to be. So I'm going to take my most negative element in my last row, negative 80, that makes my pivot column. My pivot row, I'm going to determine by my ratios. So 96 divided by 6, that gives me 16. 18 divided by 1 gives me 18. 72 divided by 2 gives me 36. I want my smallest, non-negative and not 0. So 16 would be my smallest ratio. So this top row is my pivot row. that makes 6 my pivot element. And I now want to turn that pivot element into a 1. So I'm going to star row. I'm going to multiply it by 1/6, matrix A, and I'm multiplying row 1. So now I'm going to switch over. And second matrix, arrow to math, arrow up to star row. And 1 divided by 6, comma, matrix A. And row 1, and enter. Now I don't like that there's decimals like that. That's icky. So I'm going to go to math, number 1, change it to a fraction, and hit enter. And now I can actually see the whole matrix in there, which is awesome too. So now I'm going to hit store, second matrix, number 2B, enter. And now that I've made row 1 what I want, I'm going to go write row 1 into my second tableau. So I'm going to come down here, and I have 1, 1/2, 1/6, 0, 0, 0, 16. Okay, I want to now make all of the rest of these elements in this column into zeros. And I'm going to do that by using my pivot row every time. So if I want 1 to become a 0, I'm going to star row plus. I'm going to do -1 times matrix B, use my pivot row 1, and then add it to row 2. So second matrix, math, star row plus. I'm doing -1, comma, second matrix B, comma, use row 1, add it to row 2. And store this guy as matrix C, and enter. All right, now I can write down my second row into my tableau. So 0, 1/2, -1/6, 1, 0, 0, 2. And now I'm ready to make the 2 into a 0. So my third step would be another star row plus. I now want to do -2, matrix C, times row 1, add it to row 2. So back to my graphing calculator. Second matrix, arrow to math, arrow up to star row plus. I want -2, comma, second matrix C, comma, my pivot row 1, and I'm adding to row 3. Enter, and store this into my next letter alphabetically. So for letter D, and enter. And now I'm going to go change that row. So my third row of this tableau is 0, 5, -1/3, 0, 1, 0, and 40. All right, and now to make the last row, that -80 into a 0. So my fourth step will be another star row plus, +80, matrix D, row 1, and I'm adding it to row 4. So now back to my graphing calculator. Second matrix, arrow to math, arrow up, star row plus, +80, comma, matrix D, so second matrix, number 4, comma, my pivot row 1, comma, and I add it to row 4. Close it up, and enter, and store this guy to matrix E, number 5. All right, so now that fourth row is going to get stored, and I notice that there's still a negative in that last row, so that means I'm not done, which I kind of expected because I gave you another tableau anyways, right? So 0, negative 30, 40 thirds, 0, 0, 1, and 1280. Whoops. Okay, so again, we're not done because I still have a negative in my last row, so that is my new pivot column. And my pivot row, if I do 16 divided by a half, all right, 0.5, that's going to give me 32. If I do 2 divided by 0.5, that's going to give me a 4. If I do 40 divided by 5, that's going to give me an 8. So now my pivot row is going to be my smallest ratio of a 4. So I'm going to circle this as my pivot row. So this is now my pivot element. So now I've got to make that pivot element into a 1. So my step number 5, I'm going to star row. I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal to make it into a 1. So I'm going to do 2 matrix E, and I'm using row 2 to multiply. So now I'm going to go back to my graphing calculator. Second matrix, arrow to math, and arrow up to star row, which is E. I'm going to do 2, comma, second matrix, number 5, comma, and row 2 is what I'm multiplying. Close it up and hit enter. Store this, second matrix, to F, and enter. All right, so now I can write that second row into my final tableau. So I need 0, 1, negative 1/3, 2, 0, 0, and 4. All right, so I want all the rest of those elements to become zeros, right? So let's work on this 1/2 in that first row. So step 6 will be a star row plus. I want to multiply by negative 1/2. I'm using matrix F, my pivot row 2, and I'm adding it to row 1. All right, so to my graphing calculator, second matrix, arrow to math, star row plus. I'm doing negative 1/2, so negative 1 divided by 2, comma. Then I'm going to do matrix F, so second matrix, letter F, comma, row 2, comma, and then add it to row 1. And then, again, I got a weird decimal, so I'm going to go back to math to fractions and make sure it makes everything nice little fractions for me. And then I'm going to hit store this, second matrix to number 7, and hit enter. All right, so now I'm going to go record row 1 into my tableau. 1, 0, 1/3, negative 1, 0, 0, and 14. Okay, step number 7. We want this guy, that's a 5, to become a 0. So I'm going to star row plus. I need to do negative 5. My next alphabetical matrix, F, I'm on G. I'm using row 2, and then I'm going to add it to row 3. So back to my calculator. So second matrix, arrow to math. I need letter F, star row plus. I'm doing negative 5, comma, matrix G. Second matrix, number 7, comma. I'm using pivot row 2, and I'm adding this to row 3. And enter, and store this. Second matrix to number 8, H, And then let's go record row 3 in the tableau. So we have 0, 0, 4/3, -10, 1, 0, and 20. Cool, we got one step left. So step 8 is another star row plus. I need to make -30 into a 0, so I need to multiply by 30 times matrix H. I need to use row 2 and then add it to row 4. So I'm going to put that in the calculator. So second matrix, math, star row plus, 30, comma, matrix H, comma, 2, comma, 4. Close it up and enter. And now that last row can go get written into my tableau. So 0, 0, 10/3, 60, 0, 1, 1400. Okay, so I'm going to switch back to the first page that I had, because now I need to take this and interpret what my variables are. So right here, this first column, I have a 1 and all 0, so that means I've solved for x sub 1. X sub 1 is 14. Scroll down here, variables, x sub 1 equals 14. If I go back, x sub 2, we solved for that, x sub 2 is 4. X sub 2 is 4. Okay, if I look at my slack variable columns, S sub 1 is junk, S sub 2 is junk, S sub 3 has an answer and it is 20, and Z is 1400. So now I'm going to go back and write down what those mean. S sub 1, because it was junk, is a 0. Same thing for S sub 2, because that was junk, it's also a 0. S sub 3 is 20, and Z was 1400. All right, so what does all that mean? So I'm going to type up what the solution means. This is my economic interpretation of it. So X sub 1 was chairs. So we need 14 chairs. X sub 2 was sofas. So 14 chairs and 4 sofas will need to be produced each day to make a maximum profit of $1,400. Whoops, what just happened? Maximum profit of $1,400. Now my slack variables, remember these went with, if I go back up to the top, we wrote what they meant. Extra hours of carpentry, extra finishing, and extra upholstery. So S sub 1 has no extra hours left. So there are no extra hours of carpentry or finishing, but there are 20 extra hours of upholstery. Upholstery. Spell that right? I don't know. Yeah, upholstery available each day. Cool. So all that work helped us solve what this company should be making each day to make the most money. I won't have you guys do problem number 2. So just complete problem 1 for this week. And I hope you guys have a good week. Check in on our Zoom session if you're stuck on anything, if you need any help. And please email me if you have any questions. Have a good week.